All right. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us for another exciting industry event here at Nomen. My name is Mauricio Hoffman, and on behalf of Nomen, I'll be your host tonight. As always, we'd like to extend a special thanks to our sponsors, Dell and NVIDIA. You may have heard of them. Without their support, we wouldn't be able to bring you this amazing content. Now, a quick note before we get started. If you need any closed caption, please head over to Nomen Facebook or YouTube channels. Don't forget to like and subscribe all our channels, and feel free to share this video with your friends, with your family, anybody that you think would be interested in what we do, either tonight or during the holiday break. Um, Now, I'm very excited. Tonight, we're very honored to welcome director Simon Otto and VFX supervisor Doug Ikeler as they share insights into their work on the Netflix new animated film, That Christmas. Simon and Doug will take us behind the scenes, offering a closer look at how they brought this story to life, including details on production, animation techniques, storytelling, workflows, and a lot more. Uh, Tonight, throughout the stream, you can always drop your questions in the chat. And obviously, we'll share them to our speakers. And at the end of the presentation, we're actually going to have a Q&A. So make sure that you send us all the questions that you guys might have throughout the presentation. Now, let me talk a little bit about our speakers for the evening. First, we have Simon Otto. Simon makes his feature directorial debut on That Christmas. He previously directed the Love, Death, and Robots episode from season 2 called The Tall Grass. And he was the developer, executive producer, and supervising director on the Netflix series A Tale Dark and Grim. He also directed episodes on the Netflix animated series Dragons, Race to the Edge, and Troll Hunters, Tales of Arcadia. Otto spent over 20 years working at DreamWorks Animation, most notably as the head of character animation on the Oscar-nominated movie trilogy How to Train Your Dragon. That's pretty awesome. We also have, hold on. We also have Doug Ikeler. Doug is the CTO and SVP of digital production at Locksmith Animation. He is an animation industry veteran with 35 years experience. Starting as a digital artist on traditional cel animated films, Doug moved through his career as a modeler, effects artist, and CG generalist to become the visual effects supervisor on several CG features. Throughout his career, he has worked for DreamWorks, Sony, Aardman, Rhythm and Hues, and Disney. Welcome, guys. Looking forward to hearing this presentation. Let's get it started.
Yeah, thank you, Mo. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. What a privilege. I visited Nomen before, and I was really impressed then. And watching your 5-minute highlight reel of all the crazy stuff you guys are doing, it's really impressive. And what we have done here on this on this little film of ours will feel really small in comparison, but we hope that somehow you're charmed by by those of you who have seen the film. We hope many of you have already dialed in and watched it, and so we're really looking forward to your questions. And I don't know if I could switch over to the presentation. I can start showing just a few images, bit of context, and then Doug and I will just kind of wing this and sort of answer, maybe give a little bit of insight into what what our film is about. So to get started, I really love Christmas. I loved it as a kid, and I grew up in the mountains of Switzerland. And to me, Christmas is many things. It's snow and sparkly streets and shop windows, and that feeling, the cozy feeling of going, indoors from a cold exterior, which is nothing like here in LA. So I'm definitely struggling every year to get into the Christmas mood. But what I also love about Christmas is that it's finally you have time to spend time with your loved ones, and be indoors and spend some time and talk about it. And it's inevitably also a time when you show your human flaws to each other, because you just spend a little too much time together. And it's the perfect setting for a lovely domestic drama, isn't it? Nothing ever goes exactly as planned. The dog eats the treat off the tree, the turkey gets burned, grandpa falls asleep or says something inappropriate at dinner. And we all have a Christmas like that, a Christmas experience that we call That Christmas. And our story is based on three books that were all written by the one and only Richard Curtis. One, it tells the story of twin girls that Santa mixes up on Christmas Eve, called The Empty Stocking. The second one is called Snow Day, which is the story of a young boy who doesn't get the message that the school is closed on Christmas Day, and has to spend a day with the horrible teacher at school instead of playing out in the snow. And the third one is a story that basically asks the question, how would kids celebrate Christmas if the parents weren't around? And we have taken these books and this idea of a Richard Curtis written story, like a Richard Curtis writing the screenplay, and us bringing the charm and timelessness of animation to that world and combining those two things. And we thought that would make for a really, really strong outfit. And Netflix agreed and came on board. And for those of you who don't know Richard Curtis, it's probably worth saying that this man, single-handedly has written some of the most, successful romantic comedies of the past 20 years. If you haven't seen films like Four Weddings and a Funeral, Notting Hill, About Time, or, of course, the perennial Love Actually, you really only know half of his story. And if you're an animator and you've ever studied Mr. Bean, you would also, appreciate that Richard Curtis was there with Rowan Atkinson co-creating Mr. Bean when they were still back at school together, and then sort of writing some sketch comedy with it. He created TV hits like Blackadder and The Vicar of Dibley, but also was the founder and co-creator of Comic Relief and Red Nose Day, two huge charities in the UK for which he received an honorary Oscar just 3 weeks ago. So really important to know that for us, this was, of course, a tremendous opportunity to work with Richard and bring his writing kind of universe into the world of animation. So back in 2019, when Doug and myself started working on this, I really sort of asked myself a few key questions. How do you take three small children's books that with pretty small events but quite strong emotional ideas? How do you turn those three ideas together and make it into a sweeping cinematic adventure? Then how do you tell a multi-threaded storyline in animation? That's not something we tend to do. We tend to tell single hero journeys with a big, fantastical universe and usually a villain. Like, we don't have a villain in our story per se. And then finally, for me, what was really critical is, how do you make this feel like a true Richard Curtis movie? Because for us, it was quite important that our film can kind of fit into that canon of films. So in that catalog of films that I just showed you, I want that Christmas to be sitting next to it. I wanted it to be sitting next to it. And so that's what we set out to do. And the first thing that I wrote down in this kind of deep dive into the study of Richard Curtis films was that all of his films are set in a world that he knows really well. They're real world based stories. And for us, it was pretty quickly an answer to a first question, like, how do you expand this world and make this cinematic? The idea of setting in a world that he knows very well, but that is a beach town that gets snowed in during Christmas with a lighthouse at the heart felt really cinematic to us. So we set out on our research trip and went to Suffolk. It's this, southeastern coastline of England. Some call it the bum of England, which is really rural. It's a little bit like, the Outer Banks in the US. It's very flat and big skies and estuaries and reed beds and so on. And it's really an old Victorian fishing town that hasn't really kept up with time. So it's a bit shabby. It's a bit wonky, but it's really beautiful and definitely worth a visit. And so on that research trip, on several of them actually, we took back many, many ideas. And one of the things that we discovered was that this world is a world that clashes with modernity. It's an old world that has lots and lots of elements of modernity. Like you feel like it's a little bit lost in time, but then you have, all the modern things that you might see, wheelie bin, street signs, and really odd, unusual, perky things like bottom left, that mailbox that's built into that entryway of a shop because they didn't use that entryway anymore, and so they decided to put a mailbox there. So lots of quirky things. And that idea of change became kind of a visual theme throughout our film, because our film is a lot about new generations challenging the traditions of the old generation. So we sort of, for example, developed the look of the school, which on the right side you have this old parish that once was probably started to be a little school for a few of the kids in this town, and then little by little they had to expand in the 60s and 70s and do this architectural sin of building right next to this parish, and that visual sort of collision you see all over the film. It became a big kind of visual idea in our film. And then in those early conversations between Doug, Justin, our production designer, and myself, we talked a lot about, okay, what do we want it to look like, which of course is a really important discussion to have. And very quickly we came to the conclusion that we shouldn't be thinking about what we want it to look like. We should be thinking about what it should feel like what are the emotions that we want to communicate. I think that's a really important distinction. Yes, we talked about, on the one hand, we want it to feel like a stop motion set, so it's tactile, because again, that makes you feel something about the textures, about the snow, about the way the world sort of feels. But we also wanted it to feel like an illustration. So that this idea of maybe we can create a world that's very charming, it's very approachable and appealing, but it sort of dances between those two worlds of stop motion and illustration. And Justin came back out of that and created this painting that Doug will show you a little. I'm sure you have that test, Doug, where we actually took this into 3D and just tried it out. And there was a lot of back and forth. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Doug, here, these are the beach shots were actually models that then he rendered and painted over, if I'm not mistaken.
Totally. Yeah. Half the time, that's our technique, right? Is just do paint overs. We get anything to a stage where it's like, a good place to talk about it. And then we stop, we do paint overs, we adjust, take it back into CG. That's our internal process.
And I think he used, Justin is quite, if you're ever interested, go online and look him up. And I think there's some presentations of him doing gravity sketch, like VR model. Like he is extremely fast in modeling in VR in a tool called Gravity Sketch, and then handing that over to Doug, or sometimes just doing a simple render and painting over. But one of the things that, of course, in these conversations that we very quickly again discuss is like, let's think about it because it's based in a real world. Let's think about how we create our look of picture. I always feel like the term vision is slightly misinterpreted by a lot of people, and I feel very strongly that a vision is something that you build. You have an instinct, you have an idea, you have a general sort of thrust of where you're going that's based on the writing, it's based on your own personality, and it's based on the people that are on the film. But eventually a look of picture is something that you build based on the research that you're doing. In our case, that was, of course, the writing of Richard Curtis. What does that feel like? How do we want it to feel? But also, what did we discover in this world? And I'll just walk you through a few of those points, like authenticity. So what we discovered in this world was, this world was felt a little bit like it's been lived in, and things feel recognizable, like this little guardrail, that has a history. Clearly a car backed into it, and everything is a bit bent out of shape. Or the inconsistency in shape language of the world, again, because nothing is ever new, everything is kind of inconsistent. Nothing makes sense, nothing actually fits together or is even aligned, like things are completely misaligned. The sense of repair in this world was really striking, that nothing is new, and everything just, with whatever tools they can find, whatever sort of the most efficient way of fixing something was there. And then, of course, that all got fed into the way the world looked. This is just an example of where you can see that repair showing up in our film. And of course, one of the ideas that we had very early on from the script was that we wanted the audience to know that they're in a beach town without ever showing the ocean. And that had a sort of very kind of a slightly bigger idea reason. And for those of you who've seen the film, there's a critical moment sort of in the third act of the film where all of a sudden one of our characters stands in front of the ocean and realizes the threat of this world and how dangerous it actually can be. And so our goal was to tell the audience we're in a beach town without ever showing the ocean. And of course, that coastal theme was fed into everything we did. So in that early development phase, we realized that every frame that we were looking at, we were kind of giving the same note. And it became kind of a rule of how we approached the visual development. So every frame should tell us that we're in a beach town. It should tell us that it's Christmas. And it should tell us that this place that we're looking at has a story that relates to the character and is windswept and weathered and has been there for a long time. So there's a history to the place. So we were really literally asking ourselves, does it have a history? Does it feel like a beach town? And does it feel like Christmas? And it's all peripheral, but in this image, you can see all those things are kind of peripheral. You're looking at the characters, but you're taking it in. You're taking the world of the characters in. And then also, during the same time, we were starting to talk about color and color theory of our film. And Justin brought this wonderful Californian painter called Charlie Harper into our conversation. And to him, it felt uniquely British, absurdly enough, since he was American. And it sort of related to this arts and crafts. And I don't quite know, it's sort of a chicken and egg thing. We're quite clear what came first, whether we saw the world and we recognized that it looked a bit like Charlie Harper, or we found Charlie Harper and said, you know, this fits into our world. But very quickly we found that these colors were everywhere, the same kind of muted, you know, there's no real sunshine ever in this film. Like there's a little bit of sunset, but it's always sort of coming through the clouds, and these muted colors were ever present. And we took all those ideas, you know, the wheelie bins, the history of the place, everything's been repaired, everything's handmade. And Justin made this painting that kind of shows you that, again, this idea of what the look of picture, you know, journey guided.
I mean, you gotta say why we use this piece of street, because
yes, that's right. Why don't you say that? Yeah.
Well, I mean, you know, when it's kind of pie in the sky and everything can be anything, you're looking to figure out what to kind of start touching first, right? And Simon's suggestion that authenticity, that's one of the huge things you look for. You just look for things that actually occur in the place you're going after, and you start to use them as your tool chest. But there was just this crossroad in this the middle of this town, Southwold, where we were inspired by. And Simon and we all looked at this little crossroads and we were like, what would this look like in CG? There was nothing special about it. It was just a piece of Southwold. And we chose it because it was so ordinary. And we figured, well, if we can make ordinary look right, we can do, you know, the rest will be easy, right?
Yeah, and you can literally, if you look at this painting, you can see a lot of those things, like, you know, the wheelie bins, the street sign that's not quite mounted. Everything is a bit shabby, right? You know, everything's a bit misaligned. None of the windows are the same. So all the things that we talked about showed up in this painting, and it seemed like a really good idea that we would do this. We'd sort of line ourselves up to do a CG version of that. And what I'm about to show you might not play at full speed. It might not come across, but it gives you a sense of how we were translating all those things. So I'm going to play it. The animation is very, it's just a reference point. It's a basic cycle, but let me just play it. You might have to loop it once or twice. But what I saw in this test kind of proved to me that the world of a tangible stop motion feeling world, and that the kind of power of illustration with all the signs, everything that's a signage, for example, is all hand painted. The textures are hand painted. Most of them, some of them are generated, but we're really keeping that idea of that look in mind as we were doing this test. And I was really excited to see this, and we felt like we were on the right path.
It's extremely charming, Simon. I love the town throughout the movie. It's fantastic. The look
Cool.
that you guys achieved is fantastic.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, from my point of view, guys, when we were doing this test, because at this stage it's kind of still just Justin and Simon and I doing this all together. But when you do tests like this, and once again, anything can be anything at this stage, the best thing that came out of for me, knowing I had to take the whole film into kind of digital production, is the conversation starts to shape you can hear what everybody cares about. You can see where Simon's focusing. You can see where we're struggling to hit maybe texture language or shape language or whatever. So we were putting effort into the things that we were talking the most about. And some things were like version 2 is still in the test, like the textures on those Post-its maybe, or that A-frame sign on the corner. I don't think I touched that much after day 1. And that part of the process tells you so much about what you're going to go through in the coming 2 years doing this in actual production, because you'll remember all these conversations about, oh shit, we just struggled. I'm trying to make that happen and make that happen. So these early CG tests were super valuable.
Yeah, and you finally you go away from the hypothetical into the real, right? Because the moment we all see this, we have responses to it, and we're discussing, like I remember talking about the window and how the window needs to be a certain kind of transparency, but then a little bit of, I think you put some frost on it or whatever. And it's just like finding that, or the Christmas tree was a big conversation, or the reflection on the concrete and the unevenness of the sidewalk. And so lots of those conversations actually, now they were not hypothetical, they were problem solving kind of discussions. It was really exciting. And what we also very quickly realized is hold on a minute, our movie is 80% going to be in snow. So what does this look like? So Doug stuck a different camera into the same shot, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Doug, and just threw snow on it. And again, I'll probably have to play it a few times before. Sorry, it skipped. So let me go back.
I love that you said just threw snow on it.
Yeah, that's the naivete of a director. Just put some snow on it.
We wrote our own Houdini HDA at the development point to do snow. So, and it evolved over like a year and a half. So we had a full-blown Houdini pipeline for our snow system.
But again, here where we started talking about the type of snowfall, the snowflakes, the way. I remember I was pretty adamant about the edges of the bottom side of the snow, like the side edges of the bin, and how the muffin top actually gets a little smaller, and so the shape of that. And I think, Doug, you were chasing after the little glistening on the snow surface, so that it felt like light is grazing it, but then some light reflects back to the camera.
Yeah, we always wanted a happy snow. That was what Simon was asking for from day 1. It's that snow that you just can't wait to get out and touch. You don't want it to be an old snow that looks like it might be crunchy. So everything we were after was for that quintessential, oh, I've got to be in this snow.
Yeah, and so another thing that came out of this conversation that we knew very quickly, this is very much driven by Justin, who has worked on Dark Materials and other big live action shows, and has dabbled in both live action and animation, was the idea of set dressing. So again, because one of the side effects of telling a multi-threaded storylines means you have a lot of heroes, a lot of characters, and because you're telling multiple character storylines, you can't go so deep in the writing into their backstories. So you need to have really quick hits of understanding who these characters are. And set dressing played a big role in telling us, again, this backstory of the people in this world, and of course making the world really rich. So DNEG really was, that was a big challenge for DNEG, and they really picked up the whole idea and ran with it. And our movie is, if you pay attention, is quite rich in terms of set dressing. But in this early development, of course, we were developing the script, we were developing the story, because the screenplay was being written as we were doing this visual development work, because the visual world needed to inform how we were writing the script. Because again, we're working with a live action writer who has never worked in animation. So we wanted to feed him the visuals. We wanted to make him understand what we are after and give him the sense of our our intellectual arguments. And I'll get into that a little bit more in when we talk about characters. But one thing I realized very quickly is that, well, we need some kind of a strategy about the multiple storylines. And so we came up with this idea of story identity, that when you cut from one storyline to the other, you should instinctively feel which storyline you're in. So on the left side, it would be Danny's storyline, the lonely boy who doesn't quite get Christmas, and his mom would have just, had time to maybe go buy a cheap store-bought plastic tree that actually in the film never leaves the box until much later. So it's the absence of Christmas was the idea behind the Danny storyline. And then the second storyline was the story of the twins, one naughty, one nice, who kind of live in this world of perfect Christmas. So the Christmas tree needed to look a little bit like a Macy's Christmas tree that's just perfectly decorated and color coded. It's green and red and gold, right? It tells you the colors of Christmas, but something is at threat. So in this sort of story of perfect Christmas that is under threat was sort of the idea of the second storyline. And then the third storyline is the story of Bernadette, the rebellious girl with her little sister Evie, and it would be chaotic. The last tree of the lot, maybe even chopped from their own garden, and whatever they could find, they would throw it on the tree. So that idea fed into the way we were arranging the shots, like the way we were aligning props and setting up the look of each of those storylines. So in Danny's storyline, everything would be kind of perfectly aligned, a little bit sparse, not quite filled out. And then Sam and Charlie, the twin story, would be all beautifully arranged and harmoniously presented. And then Bernadette's storyline would be just everything is at odds and chaotic, nothing lines up. It would influence the way we design props. Again, same idea, Sam and Charlie with her broken mug, but it's all Christmas colors and it's perfect. And they probably have special mugs for Christmas. Whereas Danny, has kind of something that's on the go that feels like recently bought and is on the go. And then on the right side, you have the chaos and what we call kind of the rainbow version of Christmas of Bernadette. That would influence the way we'd light sequences. Sam and Charlie at the top, the perfect harmonious Christmas would be, again, a bit chocolate box, a bit Christmas commercial. Danny storyline is the absence of Christmas, so the color red is always at a distance. It might be in frame, but never within his reach. And then Bernadette's storyline would be the lighting of an explosion of color in this kind of, again, sort of rainbow approach. And to take it one step further, which I don't have an example, is of course we did the same thing with camera. So Sam and Charlie's storyline were all very, very smooth kind of cameras. They were all kind of on a on a boom or something, like really, really gently sort of held. Danny's storyline would be more lock-offs, or like usually with a slightly longer lens, so that you feel the space between you and the character, so it's not that intimate. And then Bernadette's storyline, we would use a lot of handheld, active kind of cameras where the camera would sort of find and punch in. And you can see, if you watch the movie very closely, you can see the different languages from sequence to sequence. And then the overarching storyline, which is the Santa storyline, would be very sort of big cinematic, like big camera equipment with lots of sort of, controlled rigs and arms and booms and whatnot. And then, of course, we had to make sure that we can apply the same approach in the same time of day, same story point. Like, how do we do that? And this is just an exploration of, they go shopping in the middle of the day, and depending on where you place them and how the lighting is arranged, you can get the exact same feelings out of these. So if you were to cut between these three storylines, you get a different feeling, right? You get cozy, warm, harmonious. You get cool, distant, absence of Christmas, and you get this really bright and fun and playful rainbow color of brightness and joy in Bernadette's story. So that really helped us in shaping the film as a whole, and in understanding how these emotions contrast each other. and it's quite exciting. It was quite an exciting approach to know exactly what you're going after, and here you can see how that is at play in the film. So, of course, one of the key questions to how do you tell a Richard Curtis story in animation is, of course, to think about the characters. I mean, I'm an animator, so therefore that's the first thing I think about. So in our early conversations between Doug, Justin, and myself, you could see that we're all coming at it from a slightly different angle, and that difference in expertise helped us create a common, common sort of terminology of how we want our movies to look. But for me, the key here was, we wanted the charm of the original illustrations from the book, and Richard in particular was quite keen at first, really loved to honor Rebecca Cobb's illustrations. But I had to kind of walk him through my thinking in terms of my desire of having more three-dimensional characters that actually, can deliver the comedy and the emotion. And when I say deliver the comedy, that means I should be able to deliver a joke by simply a blink or a side look or an eye dart. And if you have, characters that don't have eye whites, for example, you're going to have to be broader in your performance. So you have to rely more on pantomime. So we wanted to kind of find a world that we could do all of that. And so what we did at first is, so we sort of cast the net quite wide, and invited a bunch of different character designers to just give us a take, and you could see how varied this looked at the very beginning. And in this research, we came across a comic book artist called Warwick Cadwell. If you love drawing and character design, please look him up. I mean, this guy, by the way, this page is drawn like this. That's a piece of paper. There's nothing digital rearranged. Like there's no eraser. He just goes and just draws these characters. And what was great about him is that he lives in a seaside town. And therefore we thought, okay, well, why don't you just go out and give us a little bit of a study of the characters that live there? Like, what does the world today look like of a seaside town? What's the universe of characters you come across? And the way he gave these characters back to us was like, oh my God, there's so many inspiring ideas here. And again, this clash of old people with new clothing and all sort of different styles. And it's an eclectic mix of characters. Gave us so many ideas that actually influenced the script and vice versa. So, for example, he did this drawing of Miss Trapper that we was like, okay, this is the woman. I mean, she really felt like my first grade teacher. And I responded to this drawing on the left so much. But I knew that I wanted to work with Uwe Heichötter, because in my mind, Uwe was the character designer that could give us that bridge between, this very illustrative, sensitive kind of style that looked very close to, or had at least a reminiscence of what Rebecca was doing in the illustrations, but it gave us three-dimensional, idiosyncratic characters with costume designs that tells a story about these characters. And he really like sort of opened our universe. And I'm quite proud to say that he designed all of our characters in 2D. Like, he went through the whole process, the evolution of each of the characters, and we worked very closely together in finding characters that would be, really unique and still fulfill the role that they had in the script. Down to, of course, one of my favorite character designs in the film is Dasher, the grumpy reindeer that we called he's like Santa's grumpy Uber driver, who just complains about, how far they've gotten. And Santa himself, of course, that again, from a design point was a real challenge of finding a character that fulfills the expectation of the audience in who Santa is and their own idea of Santa, but has a slightly different take. And our take here was that he's master and commander who brings his ship to shore in the middle of a snowstorm. And of course, pairing him up with Brian Cox ultimately was the perfect mixture to give us that character. And Uwe, what was great about him, he sort of has he has both an animator's mind, a designer's mind, but he also has a really great color sense. So he sort of took on a role of like character art director. So to go back to the Charlie Harper colors, he gave us these colors, and he really worked together with Mike Redman, our art director, in just finding. Actually, let me say something about Danny. Find these colors that would fit into our world. And of course, we picked the third from the left, which has this just tiny little tip of red on his hat, and again, that feeds back to the idea of the absence of Christmas, which of course then gets contrasted the moment he gets his gift, and Christmas becomes more of a presence in his life and starts to envelop him until at the very end, he wears a helmet that's entirely bright in red. We found ideas like Miss Trapper, who was born there, never left, kind of threw her roots down and just kind of was stuck in her own world. And we found this weed in Southwold that we loved the color scheme. And I think Justin just took a picture and came across it again and like, oh my God, this is the perfect color scheme for Trapper. It works really beautifully, this kind of green and earthy with this splash of purple. And then, that perfect nest maker, Mrs. Beckles, who creates this perfect Christmas, who better to take as a reference than a Robin Redbreast, and so the color scheme was very much modeled after this character. So imagine all that work, that took us, a long time, and working together very closely with Leo Sanchez, who, won the Oscar for A Windshield Wiper as the producer of Alberto Mielgo's short, who really did all the CG work. And I worked with him on the How to Train Your Dragon movies. He helped us age up the kids from the first to the second movie. And together with him, we created this entire cast of characters outside of the vendor pipeline. And maybe Doug, we can speak about this in a little bit, but like that's no small feat, right? To do all of that with very, very small team, just like basically what we did. And maybe you could speak to that a little bit, Doug. We did both the visual development, the look of picture, the CG look of picture inside Locksmith Animation, and we did the entire look of characters inside Locksmith and Leo Sanchez before we even started engaging with DNEG. So we had a really clear idea of what we wanted our movie to look like.
Right, and just a little backstory in case one or all of you don't know this, but we call it the vendor model, and doing Locksmith, in our case, does the setup of the film. So we do story, editorial, direction, art direction. We did layout in-house. We did character design in-house, and we did a lot of CG visual development in-house. That's our version of things. But the vendor model just means you get the movie ready to go, and once you know what you want to make, you take it to a company like DNEG, and then they have the hundreds of people that do the work. And that's our reason. All the studios have different reasons for doing it. There's a lot of tax chasing going on out there, just so you all know, and that's why you go to England to have your movie made or go to Australia. But the thing that we're passionate about is setting the movie up correctly. Setting it up, getting what you care about, figuring out all the hurdles, the tricks, the gotchas that you're going to experience once you go into production. So that's why we do Leo Sanchez Studio, to do our character design, because you don't want any of this stuff surprising you. That's kind of the modern way to make animated films. Yeah. A movie's 4 years from concept to completion.
Yeah, stay small as long as you can, right? Until you have to go big. Because once you have, once the big teams come on, you really have to move forward, because otherwise, your counter is ticking really fast. So, and that's the moment when we brought DNEG on board. I mean, they did some finishing of surfacing, and they had to sort of adapt the surfacing to their own pipeline to make it work within in their systems. But we started developing animation, and for me, animation has always been, and that's probably because I'm an animator at the core. For me, animation is an extension of story. Like, you have to give your actors a sense of, or a place to play that can actually influence the direction of a scene and how a scene plays out. So we spent quite a bit of time just developing it, but we had to move forward. And in my, I wasn't interested in, again, developing kind of a style of animation. I wanted to be pretty clean and moving forward. And I was really interested in the characters and the idiosyncrasy behind the characters. Like, for example, when we say rebellious Bernadette, what does that mean? Is that a, you know, wall breaking or sort of skateboarding punk, or somebody who just, you know, loves her family but just wants to just is constantly bumping up against these walls that the parents are putting up and just trying to break them down? Or putting characters in a setting that is quite mundane, like reading a book at school, and of course Sam would, you know, scare herself in a frenzy, and that we found that nugget that makes her entertaining, right? This sort of pigtail picking, you know, internal anxiety character. Or Danny would do the same thing, and of course he would get caught snoozing off, you know, being so bored. And again, that idea of that scene made it into the film. Or you know, if you just sat Sam and Charlie on a couch, how would that work? How would these two characters interact? On the left side, you have, you know, naughty Charlie, who's maybe a bit ADD, who's constantly, her mind is constantly wandering off to the next thing, can't quite sit still, and she's a bit floppy and slouchy. Whereas Sam, the contrast is she's all internal and can really sort of live in her own space. And the proof was, of course, these two characters who are identical puppets. I mean, they're a copy of one another. There's no different design other than the hair and the color of their outfits, which of course is a nice little saving. You can differentiate them so much just through the way they hold themselves and the way they perform. And so, of course, a lot of that development work was walk cycles. And in our case, a lot of these walk cycles, of course, we wanted to know, what does it look like in snow? And we wanted to, again, like, if you've ever walked in deep snow, you need to know how that feels, that the ground is not quite even. You have sort of a double crunch, and, you know, how does that work? So we had the benefit of having a Montreal team who could go out and do some actual reference in the snow. And several of our scenes are actual snow reference shots where somebody went out and did the reference in snow. So eventually there was, you know, that time, maybe, you know, 4 months later, we actually started doing shot work, and I'll walk you through a progression of a shot. It's gonna play a little choppy here, but maybe I can loop it twice. But generally what we would do is, because again, we weren't so much discussing style, we were discussing performance and character more than anything. I had quite an intense conversation with the animators up front. I would launch them on the scene, and then they would go out and shoot some reference and then show it to me, and then I would make my pick. And oftentimes I would ask them, can you shoot it again? But this time, in this particular case, this beautiful shot by Laura, you know, can you be floppier? I think Charlie would be floppier. She'd probably, you know, be a bit broader in her gestures, a bit, you know, a bit more like laissez-faire about it. And so she did this beautiful reference shot, and it was great that on our film we had many amazing actresses. Actually, particularly some of the female animators were really great actresses, so they did a lot of references for other animators as well. And then, as you can see, there's the lipstick camera of the actress who actually performed the line, and then the layout, and, you know, oftentimes the storyboards would also be looked at. I mean, most of the time I would ask them to look at the storyboards first, the layout to understand eye direction, camera, etc., and then start doing some reference. And one advice I could give you, for those of you animators out there, is make sure you shoot your reference once you've put a pose in the shot. Like, you need to understand the spatial environment of your shot. Pose the character in a pose that you like, that you think is roughly the key storytelling pose of your shot, and then understand the lens, understand screen direction. You know, is she looking screen left or screen right? And then go out and shoot your reference, because I think you need to understand and have lived in that space for a moment before you can actually do proper and useful reference. And yeah, so let's speak about, of course, the one character that we added. Besides the village, we added one other character that wasn't in the book, and that was this blizzard. And of course, this blizzard meant a lot of snow. In fact, I think we had budgeted, Doug, what, 30% of snow in the beginning in our first sort of initial bid, and in the end we ended up with more like 80% of all the shots had some kind of snow build, snow sculpt, snow interaction, or snowfall.
Right. Right.
Do you want to talk through these slides? So yeah, so
Sure. Let me screen share because I'll just show.
Oh yeah, okay. Let me get out here. Let's see if I can unshare. There you go.
Can you guys see a little snowy village?
Not yet. I think we need our moderators to click to bring you in. There you go.
There it is. So this is a trip down memory lane for both Simon and I. This is like the very first little bit of CG that we ever saw. In fact, we showed this to Netflix at your pitch, right? To try to get the
that was the original sales pitch.
But in setting up for why snow was so important to the film and how we did things, and Simon was talking about Justin using Gravity Sketch. So this was just done with just Justin and I doing this together, and he was kind of laying out the town in Gravity Sketch. But all we were after at this point was we just wanted to show Richard Curtis that we got what his version of a snowy covered beachside town was. So this isn't very evolved. Everything's pretty simple. Textures are not fantastic. But the cool part, you guys, is that everybody could look at this and go, all right, day one of a snow-covered seaside Suffolk town, right? And at the same time, we're building, sorry, Simon, a little bit of setup. We are building an internal pipeline that allows a generalist to kind of do anything by themselves. So that's the premise on any CG I show you today. It's all done by one person who is both being a model, or is being a modeler, a lighter, texture artist, anything that needs to be done, as they're feeding this back through Simon, Justin, and myself. And then we're just reacting to it, and then hopefully putting some pins in things. And then when the work goes to DNEG, we're saying like that, right? So we had this town that we built really early on. To the snow early on, that it was all about control. It was all about, the snow was going to be part of the storytelling. It was going to tell the viewer, if it's a happy moment, if it's a suspenseful moment, any of it. Like we were finding the snow could do all of that. So wrote a snow system that kind of had different flakes, different, amounts. And we gave it these names, right? And the name's going to tell you what you should be feeling when you see this kind of snow. So starting is just that feeling like, oh, something's about to happen, oh, I think it's going to snow. And then playful was Simon's, this was our go-to, right? This is that moment where it's just, you can just know it's going to be nice outside. This is what you stick your tongue out and hope that a snowflake lands on. Playful heavy, it's getting a little bit heavier, but you get the point. We reused our town, it was already rendering, and we just came up with this whole vocabulary of snow falling effects.
I think we had 10 in total, right? 10 terms that we then would assign sequences to. We would call each sequence that had snowfall, and we'd say this is that kind of snowfall. Right. And that would eliminate all the conversation and feedback we needed on each of these sequences.
Yeah, and you can see we're changing the lighting as these different types of snowfall falls. Yeah, I've only got 5 or 6 of them here, but it goes to like a full-on scary snow, and then it gets kind of white out and you can't see, and it, all the motion changes. But yeah, and then the snow evolved. This is another one of our early tests, but we knew we were going to do a lot of footfall, so start talking about what footprints would look like. Simon, this only has 1 turkey in it. This was before I had any idea that there was a whole pack or herd of turkeys. So, this is us, our first goes at making Justin's painting come to life. Our little pipeline is all the things you guys are using. So it's all Maya, Substance, Houdini. We were rendering in Clarice at this time. Now we're rendering in Solaris. But it's all one person doing every shot, which I really encourage all of you, really try to be a generalist if you can. You're going to be super valuable in the industry if you can be.
Yeah.
Yeah. I got more snow. Let me just show. There's another version of that beach from a different angle. This is kind of meant to be for the end of the movie, Simon.
Yeah, which was really tricky, right? This sort of like, how far to the beach, to the water does it actually snow? Like, how much do you actually see? Where does it melt? How does it gradually get, sandy?
Right. This is a pivotal moment in the movie where, you got to watch the film if you haven't. So I won't spoil if you haven't. But Danny has some making up to do to his mom, and this is how he does it, which is a really sweet moment. And then we had we went ahead and scripted the film for like depth of snow. So at any moment of the film, I just used grayscale versions of the set just to show the evolution of snow during the course of the film. That's how into snow we were.
Do you have the video of I have it here, the video of the tool you built, like that sort of
Sorry.
the snow sculpt tool?
Oh no, go ahead, show it.
Yeah, let me show that. I think that's super interesting. Okay, let me share my screen again. You guys tell me how we're doing in time. We're sort of
Well, while he's doing that, I'll just let you all know. Like, this is one of the tricky things about doing a film is you have to figure out what is the right amount of work to do, knowing that you've got 80% of your shots that have it, and you've got a fixed budget. So a lot of the way we wrote the tool was to make it as creative as possible to allow the person who was sitting in front of the tool to be able to sculpt and decide where the interest of this shot was.
So you could sort of designate areas that you wanted to upraise, right? And like there, and have like a way to go in and sculpt those areas. The irregularity, I think, is what you have these kind of controllers that allow you to sort of the shape of the snow.
Yeah, and then this is just kind of some example sculpting, but this is pretty much what we did. We just basically dropped a mesh that determined where the snow would be, and this mesh had the ability to do that muffin top thing that Simon liked, but then just decided where you wanted to put your interest or put the resolution so that you could sculpt it right there. We were doing the effects artists at DNEG were doing a set per day, so they were laying down the base foundation of all the snow in one day, and then sculpting was probably 3 more days work per set. So it wasn't a tremendous amount of work. There's a lot of work once we get to interaction like this and the footfall. That's where it really started to slow down, but we had coverage pretty cheaply.
And so this shot here just shows a very simple, like, so you have snow sculpt, snowfall, snow interaction, and so that how it came together. Atmosphere, of course, is a big part of it too. Of course, as most of you will know, that of course effects only look good if the lighting does the right job. And one of the trickiest things that we even down to the color grade, we were catching as best as we could. The hardest part about it was the white balance between all the elements: the teeth, the eyes, the towel, the snow. Like everything is kind of white, and you make sure that it all lives in the same lighting environment. That was quite tricky. And as most movies do, we also wanted, so we knew how we were going to jump from sequence to sequence, but we also wanted to, of course, understand how the arc of the movie kind of develops. And for us, I don't necessarily believe in lighting equal emotion, although you can do that, but sometimes you want to play against it. So you want to make those decisions. But I think more importantly for us, there was a sense of understanding how much light and dark we have, how many sequences are dark, how much of the movie plays in darkness and how much of the movie plays in daytime. And we realized the movie has a lot of nighttime scenes, and so we needed to adjust it a little bit so that the movie doesn't get too dark. But in that process of color keys, of paintings, we explored moments of kitchen sink drama that was quite realistic and cool in that sense, or moments of heightened theatrical feeling that should give you sort of a sense of longing and loneliness, or a heightened feeling of joy and kind of the fantasy and dream of Christmas, or real dark drama, like really intense drama. And of course, it wouldn't be a Richard Curtis movie if there wasn't also a sense of romance in the film. And I'm going to try and go through this pretty quickly, but I just love this. As not being a lighter myself, I've never worked in lighting and paint, but I've never worked in lighting, and I just wanted to ask the guys to collect me every render that I saw or that you saw, Doug, I think, or you and Justin, from the color key through, the color setup, I mean, the lighting setup, to, first corrections of, like first discussions after notes, redoing the snow build because it wasn't quite right for the shot, down to, first lighting setups, actually first, probably this is for the first pass addressing all the notes, to realizing actually it doesn't quite look like the shot that we had planned originally. It doesn't quite get that feeling from a look, first look image that we had, and not feeling quite right about the snow sculpt. So we started doing more paint overs. Paint over one wasn't quite right. It was maybe too dark. Paint over two changed it a little bit. And particularly on the snow sculpt, then we went back to the snow sculpt and did some adjustments. And you can see these were 3 paint overs where we wanted to get the right look, to then having a first version of the actual shot that felt really good, and then just little by little improving, giving notes. I think it's, until we get quite close to the final shot. And I'm just trying to catch from there. From lighting, we went into the color grade, and even just the difference between the last approved lighting to color grade, you can feel quite a difference. So there's a process to how these shots evolve through the pipeline. I find that quite fascinating, and how often you can think you have all the ingredients, you know exactly what you want, but you just don't see it yet, and then you just have to stay with it until you really get what you want. I mean, sometimes you play with what you have, and what you get for free might be an inspiration to do something better than what you wanted, but to really always think about what do you actually want to see. And I think paint overs are quite useful. So that's kind of the end. Unless, Doug, you have anything. Of course, there's so much more to talk about, from the score to the song. We have an original Ed Sheeran song in the film, and how that came about was exciting. But to me, as the director, the most glorious moment of the making of the film is to be able to go into the recording studio and actually just sit in and listen to 100 piece orchestra playing the score that you had heard and developed with the composer as demo versions. It was really quite a special experience. But yeah, so thank you very much for listening. I wonder if you have some questions. Please shoot them into the chat, right, Mo? How do we do this?
Yes, so I have some questions for you guys, and obviously, anybody that is listening that want me to ask questions, please do so. Please write them down, and I'll get to them. But before that, I wanted to thank you guys. I mean, I was just quietly watching all these display of art, all this collection of going from pre-production and character design all the way to production shots, and it's just amazing. I mean, this is a great companion to the movie. I just recently watched the movie, and now listen to this. It's like watching the DVD's extras, even better because you guys are live. So I wanted to thank you guys for being here and for sharing all this wealth of knowledge.
Yeah, thanks for having us. It's true, those DVD extras don't exist anymore, right? It's so hard to find
Yeah, you can find them right here, right? Like this is it.
I guess you have to go to Gnome to get all this.
So just to answer a question that was asked earlier, this is being recorded. So if you guys are casually watching and you want to come back and take notes, or if you want to share it with your friends, this is recorded, and it's going to be. You guys can get it where you can get the events. Where I don't remember. I have really like the memory of a chicken, so I don't have the information right now. But I'll have it as soon as they type it for me to tell you guys where to get the videos. I wanted to ask you guys a couple of questions regarding production, right? Like we here at Newman, we love everything about this, right? We love story, we love how all these different artistic elements come together to really just create a magnificent production. But some of the questions that I have are a little bit more directed to visual storytelling and to the tech that it takes to create a movie like this. So I guess the first one I'm going to talk, especially since you showed a lot of pre-production, and you also talked a little bit about production, is I wanted to ask you if you can go a little bit into how much pre-production is enough before you start working in production, right? Like how much do you need to observe and to take an input before you start uh, getting putting stuff and creating the movie?
Doug, I mean, that's a good question for you. I mean, my quick answer is you never have enough. Of course, you would love to do more, and you're kind of at the mercy of your budget and how the movie was budgeted. But you basically you have a hit list of the most important things and the less important things, and you want to start with the most important things. Um, but in our case, that was clearly biggest challenges were multi-threaded storylines. So you have a large cast of characters that need to all deliver like a primary character. We were going to have a lot of snow effects and snow interaction. That was a big challenge. And the look of our film, like what do we actually want it to look like, and be able to sell it to people. Like as a director, the biggest difference between a head of animation and being a director is that you're constantly having to pitch what you see, what you've talked about, all that history of development. You need to bring it into a launch. You need to be able to phrase and frame it. And so the more reference points you have, the more people will understand and move in the same direction. Because I think the job of director is keeping people on that track, but within that track, letting them explore and explore themselves and explore their art. So it's quite important to have some really key pieces that you can show. This is what we're after.
It's a super deep question, Mo, because like I said earlier, an animated film typically is 4 years from concept to completion, and really only the last year is production. So the DNA part was 1 year per department. But it's feature animation is super organic. Everything is always changing all the time. So whenever you think you have anything nailed down, like Simon's like we're 6 months from production and he's still getting notes from Netflix and Richard Curtis about some things that are, story driven. So we're constantly dealing with that. We are constantly like making sure our appetite matches with the budget that we have. And we have to always have the technology like one step behind it so that we're never like unsure about how much something's going to cost because we don't know how to do it. So all of that's happening at the same time, kind of real time. And you can't really compare it to live action. It's just different. Feature anim is just different. It's so wide compared to live action. Live action tends to have this mentality of just beat whatever's in front of you into submission, but we're not because everything's kind of going. It's such a slow, long process that you have the whole film up in production, kind of all at the same time marching forward. So any big changes or Simon needs to add, and probably I went the wrong way. Simon needs to cut 2 minutes of his film.
More likely.
So all of that stuff is like coming in as you're going. So organic's the best way to put it, but we're constantly adjusting and constantly like trying to find ways to move Rob from Peter to pay Paul, as they say,
Well, I can tell you that one of the things that I noticed from the film is that there's relatability everywhere. In the behavior of the kids, in the behavior of the adults, in the way that the snow looks, in the way that the town looks. It feels like a living world. And that's testament to the work that you did in pre-production. So I wanted to mention that. I felt like that world existed.
Hearing that means a lot because, of course, that was the most important thing we wanted to go after, right? We wanted to give you a world you haven't seen, you haven't experienced, but we wanted for it to feel like it's a world you could technically go visit, right?
Yeah, and I think that was it was incredibly successful. It felt like the world, like a world that it's right there, right? Like I see it and I understand it and I believe that it exists, right? Like there's suspension of disbelief. You got me. So that was really great.
Thank you.
I have a couple more questions. Another one you mentioned. I think it was Doug that mentioned that the value of being a generalist, and that speaks a lot to us here at Nomen because students here they learn about a lot of disciplines. They get to choose one discipline that they can become a specialist on, but they actually learn a little bit about a lot of disciplines because, again, I mentioned this a lot. We're in the business of creating the future directors, right? So as a director, we want to make sure that they have an idea of a lot of different disciplines. But a lot of the questions that we get from students is, what are the best pairings? If I'm going to be a generalist, what are the best pairing of disciplines that you see that works in production, right?
Well, Doug and I will probably have different answers to that question.
I would love to hear them.
You first, Doug.
All right. The best generalist out there, just to go straight out and answer your question, is the most balanced person. So not the jack of all trades, master of none. That's literally what I go after all the time, because you're only going to be as good as what you're not good at, if that makes sense. Whatever you're not good at, that's the first thing that'll show up. So a good balance, and that balance is not just creative and technical. That balance is like, the ability to read another person when they're giving you visual notes verbally, and it all comes into play, right? And I got my little team of visual development artists. There's only 4 of us, right? But we each have kind of wear different hats, even though I tell them, no, we're generalists. One's better at texturing, one's better technically, one's better at modeling, just fast modeling. But the day that they get stuck, like cycling on something, the day that they can't problem solve quickly kills them. You guys, I know you all know this. I saw that reel was impressive. When you're doing visual work, there's this momentum, this creative momentum that goes with what you're doing. Like, you're just killing it. I love this. It's getting better every day. And then you hit a block one day, and all of a sudden, effing 2 days later, you didn't do anything. And you're just like, you're just like, what happened? Why am I not progressing anymore? And it's because you got caught. It got caught in your head, went down a rabbit hole, either on something technical, or you just don't like what you're seeing anymore. Something like that happens all the time. And so everything I teach my team is all about getting past those points. Just, it's going to happen to you. Just keep when that happens, go fight on a different front. Go hit it from over here. You'll come back 2 days later, you're going to have a brand new idea. For me, it's when I wake up. Like, in the late afternoon, I'm like banging my head against something. I hate it. So I wake up in the morning and I have this really clear idea, and it's usually right. And somehow I didn't see it for the last 4 hours of the day before. So whatever it takes, get your head off of it. Just keep yourself moving. Don't let yourself mire down in the depression or whatever it is. That's my version of it.
It's like the equivalent of writer's block in whatever artistic discipline.
So here, before you go, Simon, you got to respect that it's a very complicated technical process. We're all getting good at it. The software machines are getting faster. AI is going to find its place in all of this. But at the end of the day, it's still really difficult. It's intricate. What we do is intricate. Appreciate when something good comes together for you. Appreciate how intricate it is. You did good on the model, you did good on texturing, and you found this cool way to do this that you'd never done before. All of that is, onion layers, and the intricacy, it's not out there in a lot of jobs the way it is in these jobs.
Yeah. So my answer to your question, I just come at it from a different angle. I love what Doug said, and I completely agree with all of it. I just come at it from a slightly different angle, because I started as a traditional animator, became a computer animator, and then I don't know how to model, I don't know how to texture, I don't know how to do it. I don't know any of it. Like, I can animate, and I can storyboard, and I can write. I think that's also right. It's but I think the most important thing is you have to find what you love. I think that's the key element. I think the key pairing is to do those things that you love, that will allow you to get into the industry, because once you're in, you can shape your path a little bit. I mean, it's hard. For example, if you get really good at something, it's quite hard to go away from that and do something else, because most likely that means somebody wants you there, or you get paid well here, and in order to get over here, you're going to get paid less. But so I think get into the industry, it's got to be your first goal, and get into the industry doing something that you love. Like, it doesn't make sense if you love let's say texturing and surfacing, but you want to be a director, that you would then say, well, I don't want to do texturing because I want to be a director, even though I love doing this. Therefore, I'm going to do whatever layout. I don't know. So that's an example. I do think that once you're in it, you got to ask yourself about what you want to do in your career, and frankly, for most of us, that changes over time, because you've done something at a certain point, and then maybe you feel like, oh, maybe I want to try something else, or maybe I want to evolve, maybe I want to rise up the ranks and become a CG soup or a visual effects supervisor. If you want to become a director inside the industry, I mean, there's two ways, right? One is you do the Gins Sapalotis route, where you're going to do Flow, the movie that's just out, that with the cat in this sort of inundated world. It's amazing. I mean, that's a garage project. It's more than a garage project. But he started making his first feature when he was 21 years old, and he did everything, right? He I don't think he even had a script. He probably had an outline, and then in laid out his entire movie, and then animated. It's impressive. If you ever can get that guy into your into this podcast or this video session, I think it would be really interesting. So he is a generalist that tells stories through his process, and through that doing the storytelling, he became a director. I think in order to become a director inside Hollywood, you got to know characters, and you got to know story, and you got to know cinematography, which I'm sure is all the things you teach as well. But in order to, I think the route via animation or story is probably a more direct route in animation. And by that I mean, family entertainment animation. In live action, it might be different, right? Because then, but even there, I think you gotta somehow find your way through, learning about writing, learning about storytelling, learning about characters, learning about acting, those skills. If you keep just in the sort of execution side of the pipeline, that jump to storytelling will be really, really challenging, will be difficult. You just have to do it. I mean, you have to do it maybe even in classes or your own education, reading books, but the jump to getting to direct your first thing is the hard part. Is it a short film? Is it a television series that somebody gives you a chance on? Usually it happens through short films. When you're a storyboard artist, you can kind of rise through the ranks and become a head of story, and then you're sitting in editorial, you're sitting with the directors, and all of a sudden a head of story is in line to become the next director in an animation studio.
So different disciplines have different paths, obviously.
I think so, yeah. I mean, and not to say that it's impossible to go from one to the other. That's why I'm saying, depending on your age and experience, get into the industry and start working, because you can observe what's happening around it. Just know that if your end goal is being a director, you got to start reading storybooks. You got to start writing, and ideally storyboarding. And if you don't draw, definitely writing and directing little short films, even if it's simple live action films shot on an iPhone. It's what I mean. Being in editorial, being in story, being in writing is what gets you to the directing position.
Awesome, thank you. We have a couple of specific questions. One of them is how, this one I believe is more for Doug. How did you animate and do the effects for the snowman building scene?
Yeah, I mean, the crazy part about that, and it was one of the first production shots to go through, and that's always what happens. Like you spend a lot of time on this totally unimportant shot, and then all of a sudden the hardest shot in the movie is the next shot you do. And so we knew early on, like we had spotted the film. Simon was expecting a lot from that sequence. We had spotted that as like, we're doing a lot of effects right here. And it was the first thing that DNEG did. It was the first snow interaction that they did. So DNEG's really good at effects, really good. And so the theories behind what snow does physically are pretty sound. Like physically, the math is pretty sound, is what I'm saying. Like, so when it works, it works. And so we just we just paid for it to actually, essentially that each one of those shots, just to give you a little insight, each one of those shots was like 3 or 4 weeks of one effects artist time minimum. That's how important those shots were. And so the simulation to get a snowball rolling, and we was given a lot of notes about how much snow was on the backside of the snowball when the snowball would turn over after it had gathered snow, because we all have opinions about what was looking right. But those are expensive shots, is the short answer. But also DNEG was really good at it, and the physics and the simulation that was being run in Houdini was all based on Vellum. If any of your artists there are Houdini artists, so there's grain. It's a grain system. So the grains have this ability to attach to other grains, and once you get a certain adhesion, they stay as one big object. It's all math that goes behind doing that.
How much did your work on Arthur Christmas, like your previous movies and about snow, help you in this?
Me personally, yeah. I have a really high standard for snow.
Because you've done it before, right?
Two Christmas films, yeah.
And how much did we benefit from movies like Frozen and papers that have been written on particle or I guess this system?
I love telling the backstory almost more than I like talking about the tech, because you guys go do your own homework, but go look at Frozen. They don't ever show. Frozen didn't have a huge budget, which makes it even a better film.
Yeah, the fact that it made $1.5 billion. So.
Yeah, well, it makes it even better, right? But you watch, they don't ever show the character's feet touching the ground. Almost all shots are waist up or knee up.
We claim that we have more snow effects in the film than Frozen.
I'm sure we do. You smile, but I'm pretty sure we do. Yeah.
Well, also CG, I think the CG technology advances at an exponential speed, right? Like having this film be, whatever many years after Frozen, it just means that you just have like that much more technology at your fingertips, right? Not to mention like knowledge, right? It's not just about the tech; it's all about artistic knowledge on how to use it. So anyway, sorry.
Well, and just to finish what I was going to say, because like I said, it's about the backstory for me. The thing you got to know about our snow effects is it's not like, okay, so that gentleman, I think it was a gentleman, but anyway, whoever asked that question, that was like us going all in, right? But a lot of the times it's just like picking your battles. It's just like, oh, well, I need snow in the whole movie, and I don't want every shot to cost that much. So it's a lot about figuring out when to use it and how to use it when you do use it, so that you're really telling the audience, like you're telling so much about snow by doing 3 snow shots correctly, and then the next 20 shots, the audience infers that the same interaction is happening, but you'll see we didn't show it, and that's all part of the formula to doing effects correctly in my book. Like you show it, you tell them what correct is, and then you let them fill in the blanks on the next like 20 shots, like I said.
Wow, that's awesome. That's awesome. Thank you. Another, I think this one is probably it's for both of you guys. It's more about story. What's the name of the teacher?
Miss Trapper. Yeah.
Trapper. Okay. Yes. Okay.
Yeah,
So
how did she know that it was always?
This is my favorite question, Simon.
Yeah. Yeah, it's great. They first, you can see it. It says, "I really enjoyed the film, and I'm curious, how did Miss Trapper always know that William was hiding behind her? Hiding near behind her."
Human.
So the way we're approaching the character, it's like it's a memory that I think we all have from certain teachers, that in the moment you do something wrong or you're about to, I don't know, throw a piece of paper on your schoolmate, you're gonna get caught by this one teacher, like as if that person has like extra set of eyes in the back of their head, so they're just so experienced that they can. And I think it felt to us truthful that this woman was just slightly, had a slight sense, like an extra sense, that she was always catch this little poor Danny and making his life worse by being caught, right? In a way, obviously, ultimately, it turned out that this teacher plays a really important role in Danny's life. And I love that. So there's no real explanation other than she can. She has that sixth sense. She has that smarts. She understands the kid. She understands Danny beyond what the average person would. And that's the power of a great teacher.
And she's
Yeah,
she's
they're
slightly superhuman.
She's very connected. I felt those characters. Obviously, they're if you watch a movie, spoiler alert, but those characters are very very much connected.
I never told you this, Simon, but one of my favorite moments is when Danny is building that snowman, and he's got, you can see the hair on his neck stand up, and he turns, and there she is upstairs. And he starts rolling again, and he turns again, and she's downstairs in a millisecond.
Yeah, so she's a bit of a Kathy Bates character, right? In Misery, and there's things happening that it's sort of a bit of a horror trope in a way that they pop up in the right moment or the wrong moment for you, and so we played with that idea on Trapper. We just thought it was really funny. Sorry, the second follow-up question is also, how does Charlie making a beard with Buddy's hair play into the idea that Charlie was being naughty to help Sam? Was this simply separate from that idea? I love how Chris is really digging deep. Yeah, I think it's at one point later in the film, Charlie answers this in a way which is, motivation is a really complicated thing, right? It's a really complicated question. So the idea of motivation, of did she do it all for her sister, which is true. I think Charlie's intention is she wants to make the world more fun for her sister, because that's who she cares about the most. They're twins, they live every moment together. But she also, of course, wants to tell Sam, relax, it's going to be okay. Like, don't be so stressed. Not realizing that by doing that, it's like when somebody says to you, oh, don't worry, and you're worried, like that's not helping you when somebody tells you that, right? So I think that dynamic we're exploring, where you have a kid, and I had this brother, I tell you, my brother was the naughtiest brother you can imagine, and we loved spending time together. And the moment we got in trouble, our parents would be mad at us, we immediately were like a unit again, even though we were just fighting 5 minutes ago. And I think the idea that Charlie doesn't quite know how to do this, even though she does it for her sister. I think shaving the dog's midsection to make herself a beard for being on stage had nothing to do with Sam. It just had to do with her being creative. So again, she's this creative ADD kid who cannot stand still and immediately goes to the next thing. So it was just a fun thing that she's not stopping at one hurdle to get what she wants, to do something a bit outrageous. And in fact, shaving the dog's midsection only hurts the neighbor. It doesn't hurt the dog. The dog doesn't care whether his midsection is shaved, but the neighbor bothers the neighbor, and Sam definitely dislikes the neighbor. Sorry, we're going really deep into story motivation, but we did talk about that is in itself hurts the neighbor, which is somebody that Sam doesn't like.
It's great, man. It looks like a lot of this stuff is already connected. Nothing is by chance. Another thing that I noticed is that you guys are showing also a bunch of emotions. Each character kind of has like its own staple emotion that at some point it flares in order to continue to tell the story. How did you guys approach that? How do you guys approach emotion in like the different emotions that you wanted the characters to have, and obviously by empathetic link to the audience to have?
Yeah, I mean, I'm assuming when you say emotion, like both the key emotions where the characters are at the worst moment in their story, but also probably the way they are different from each other, right? I mean, I love working on ensemble casts, like How to Train Your Dragon, in my mind, was a big ensemble cast. And the most important thing you have to do, and I highly recommend thinking about this, is when you develop a character, yes, you can say, okay, well, it's a tall character who, has bad knees and generally acts leading with his nose, so his head is behaving a certain way. Shoulders are rolled forward because that shows he's a little bit cool. Whatever, like whatever argument you may, you just think about this character, who he is, and generally just posture will tell you so much about who this character is. Pride versus inversion versus, you know, floppy arms versus stiff arms. All that explores something, like expresses something. But the key thing is, it's much, much more effective when you have two characters next to each other who are completely different. And the more characters you add, the more you have to push them into different directions. It's like working with color or light. Like you have to push these extremes in all different directions so they don't seem similar. And so that's how we approach character. And then I think the emotion of those moments, the deep moments where the audience feels the emotion of the character, I think that has a lot to do with writing and how you use time and pacing to get to those emotions, and how you build up those moments of you know, deep character moments, like Bernadette's breakdown at the beach. You know, like we really thought about how we can make this the most dramatic, and that she thinks all is lost, when in fact, you know, she just gives up, and that's the moment where the other kids come in and help her kind of overcome that hurdle and you know, realize something. So yeah, so those moments are more about writing and structure and cinematography and how you build those moments. But I love creating characters that are both, you know, in a way archetypal, right? That we recognize a certain type behind the characters, but then also map them with a uniqueness that, you know, we haven't seen like this before, but that is something that you recognize from real life. I really believe that what makes characters entertaining is when we in our heads go, oh, it's a little bit like that character that I can't quite name, but I've seen this before. And it's just a caricature of that, or
somebody I know from real world, right? Like somebody that we all have those experiences,
or a combination, right? It's a little bit like Aunt Gemma, but also this person from work, and there's some, like, I love doing that. I love creating these unique characters through. And by the way, this is less writing and it's more character development to character design and animation.
It was fantastic. I thought it was great, and like what you mentioned about the power centers, like their postures and everything, it is incredibly clear. Like the movie just hits the ground running, right? You don't have to. It's one of those beautiful things where when you see a character, you get to know the character right away, and then you can just listen. You can just continue with the story. You don't have to figure out like, I wonder what that character does. It's like,
I mean, generally, I think it's you should be able through. Well, without dialogue, you should be able to give an audience a sense of who this character is and get it right away, right? That's what, I mean, in animation in particular. You can then, of course, you can go with a certain impression of a character and then flip the page on it, right? You can say, yes, I gave you this character, but in fact, it's not a villain, it's a good guy.
But that's intentional, obviously. Like you would do that with intention. You don't want there to be, if you want a character to be clear and your audience is confused, there's obviously like, you know, the link was broken.
I think worse than confused, it's vague. I think the worst thing you can do is to be vague about characters. Like you want to be quite clear, and with one or two lines of dialogues, posture, character design, the audience should have a familiar impression and an idea of who this character is. That then you can evolve, right? You can, like Miss Trapper, we have a certain impression of her and then find out that there's actually a different character behind it.
Yeah, it's really nice character arc for sure, which is a character evolution. We have another question regarding characters, and I think this is probably going to be our last question. It says, for the characters, do you get aspects on how they act from the voice actors, taking little things the actors do and use that for the animation? And I'm going to add a little bit to this question. Or do you normally have animators shoot the reference, or a combination of both?
I mean, the end result is generally a combination of both, but I'd say it leans towards the reference that the animator shoots, that is guided through direction and, you know, supervision by other animators, and of course the development you've done before. So it's always a process to get to how a character performs. In some cases, like I can give you an example, Stoic in How to Train Your Dragon, the father, he Gerard Butler would do this one-handed gesture when he was like boisterous and big, and that's an idea that Christoph Seron, the supervising animator, thought was really great. We can use this, and then so that some of those ideas fed into the development of the character. But it's because at that point he was searching for something that makes it unique and idiosyncratic. So I think that the voice performance shapes the performance, of course, because there's a radio play. And generally what we do is like we listen to the animation, we know what the story is saying, we listen to the radio play, and when you close your eyes, you have an impression of what that performance is. That's generally your first solution. That's probably what you're going after. But it's always good to go, all right, that was my first impression. What else can we do? Like, and you start searching and searching and searching for ideas. You start acting it out yourself. And so that process gets you to the performance. But it depends a little bit on characters. Like in our case, Santa is voiced by Brian Cox, but we had the character design and all that was done before we had the voice. And so it's only his performance that shapes the animation. It's not so much that we said, oh, he should move a little bit like Brian Cox, because Brian Cox is a 75-year-old man who can't do what Santa did, even though it was fun. When he actually came into the recording session, he was quite a sort of calm, man who's quite tough and, stares you down a little bit, but he walks quite slowly. And then he goes behind the microphone and he just turns it on, and he sort of would inflate, and you would be really like physical in the way a 75-year-old man does, like he's not falling off a roof. But so it was quite interesting to see him work his physicality into the performance. And yes, we used it as lipstick camera as reference, but the animator's reference was really what was the performance more than the lipstick camera.
Makes sense. Yeah. All right. Well, what can I say? This was an amazing presentation. It was great talking with you guys. It was great to get a lot of your insights. So I can't thank you enough. So Simon and Doug, can't wait to see what you guys do next. And again, thank you so much for sharing your time and your stories with us. This was an incredible presentation. Now, if you haven't seen the movie, do yourself a favor and watch it. It's streaming now on Netflix, so check it out. It's called That Christmas. Fantastic film.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, it was.
Thank
it was
you very
really
much.
great.
I mean, listen, two things. If you don't want to watch it, just turn it on Netflix, turn the sound off, and just let it play so we get to play. And secondly, if you didn't like the film, just don't tell us. And to us, it'll be still great.
No, but it's a great movie, and obviously right now, Christmas time, great film to watch. Great film to watch for the family, with the family.
Listen, I just want to say,
thank you so much.
I want to tell you that we are extremely proud of the film and are very happy with the result. I mean, we set out to do something quite unique in animation, which is telling a multi-threaded storyline, and we're really happy that we got to do this unique original IP. Our unknown IP, and we got to make an original film, and we're really happy with how it turned out. And everyone at Locksmith, I mean, we're just spokespeople to a crew of 50, 60 people at Locksmith Animation, and if you include DNEG and everyone, we're up to like 600 people who worked on this film over the course of 4 years, off and on, and we're very proud to be spokespeople for all those people, and hopefully one day all of you guys who are studying at Nomen, get to come and join this industry, and we get the privilege of working with you talented people one of these days.
We would love to. That's awesome. And you guys, if you're in LA, you have to come check out Nomen, okay?
Let's do it. Thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I also want to thank, again, our sponsors, Dell and NVIDIA. And also thank you all at home for watching. We were going to be back in January with more industry events. Until then, if you want to find out how Nomen can help you with your artistic journey, contact us at nomen.edu. Happy holidays and good night, everybody. See you guys around.
Bye.
Bye.